Uncle Morris was an unusual character, no doubt about it. He had never settled into a stable life, never married, never held a job for longer than a year. College had booted him for being too wild, and even the army dismissed him after he started claiming he'd been abducted by aliens during his service in Afghanistan. He never managed to prove those stories, and had been harshly punished for them, but he stuck to his tale. Morris was a die-hard fan of comics, anime, and sci-fi, always diving into fantastical worlds that others saw as silly. Despite his unconventional life, he was undeniably kind. He had always been there for Mark and Martha, never too busy to laugh at their jokes or listen to their movie ideas. Mark knew Uncle Morris wasn't the most logical choice for this task. He wasn't a scientist, a strategist, or even someone society would call trustworthy. But Mark also knew Morris deserved it. His uncle had spent his life being dismissed, misunderstood, and overlooked, and yet he had never let bitterness take over. He deserved the chance to be part of something extraordinary, even if it was as strange and risky as alien technology. The thought brought Mark a sense of calm and direction. Maybe Morris wasn't the best person for this adventure, but he was the right person, and Mark was ready to trust him. Mark took a deep breath, staring at his phone before pressing the call button. His heart raced as the line connected, and the familiar voice of Uncle Morris greeted him with surprise. "Mark? Hey, kid, what's up?" Morris sounded genuinely curious. After all, this was the first time Mark had reached out on his own, without his dad acting as the middleman. "I need your address," Mark said, keeping his tone casual while his mind buzzed with anticipation. Morris chuckled, intrigued by the sudden request. He rattled off the location of the comic book store where he worked, a cozy little shop tucked away in town. Morris explained he'd be working until closing and couldn't spare time to pick Mark up, especially if he wanted to avoid being late. Mark quickly reassured him. "Don't worry, I'll come to you," he said, trying to sound calm. Morris hesitated for a moment, clearly curious about why his nephew wanted to meet him. But whatever his suspicions were, he didn't voice them. Instead, he replied, "All right, see you there, kid," before hanging up. Mark placed his phone down, a knot forming in his stomach. This meeting could change everything, but it also carried risks. Now that the plan was set, it was time to prepare for what might be one of the most important conversations of his life. Would Morris believe him, or dismiss his story like so many others would? Mark could only hope his uncle's curiosity and openness would guide the way. A couple of hours later, Mark arrived at the comic book store, the cloaking device engaged to conceal his makeshift airplane. The flight had been exhilarating, his heart racing with every turn. But as he entered the store, a mix of excitement and nerves settled over him. The shop was empty, save for Uncle Morris, who was organizing the comic shelves with his usual relaxed demeanor. Mark walked in awkwardly, arms held out as though cradling something invisible, because, well, he was. He carefully placed the cloaked airplane on top of one of the taller shelves, ensuring it was out of sight before turning to face Morris with a grin. Without hesitation, he approached his uncle and pulled him into a big hug. "I have a great story to tell you," Mark said, his voice brimming with excitement. Morris smiled wide, his curiosity instantly piqued. "And I can't wait to hear it," he replied warmly, the usual sparkle in his eyes. But Mark's tone shifted, becoming serious. "Uncle Morris, is the story about you being abducted by aliens in Afghanistan true?" The question landed heavily. Morris's expression changed. His easygoing smile faded, replaced by a look of discomfort. He hesitated, but Mark pressed him for an answer. Finally, Morris sighed and confessed. "As much as I'd love for it to be true, Mark, I made it up," Morris admitted, his voice tinged with regret. "I was stuck at a post in the middle of nowhere, hours upon hours of staring at the same dusty horizon in blistering heat, with nothing happening. It was torture. I needed a way to get my commander to relieve me from that post. My options were to get injured or, well, to make up a story crazy enough to make them pull me out." Mark listened intently, nodding as his uncle continued. "I chose the alien abduction story. Pretending I'd lost my grip on reality felt safer than risking actual harm," Morris explained, his shoulders sagging. "But of course no one believed me. And it didn't end well. Mark paused, letting the confession sink in. He wasn't upset. He understood. The heat, the isolation, the boredom, it all made sense. "Do you wish the story had been real?" Mark asked gently. Morris gave a small, wistful laugh. "Honestly, yeah. My life's so uneventful now that being abducted by aliens might have been the most exciting thing to ever happen to me." Mark smiled. "Well, you might just get your chance," he said cryptically, his excitement bubbling just beneath the surface. If anyone deserved to be a part of this extraordinary adventure, Mark thought, it was Uncle Morris. Mark grinned as he handed his phone to Morris, displaying the photos he had taken during his extraordinary adventure. Morris flipped through them, raising an eyebrow in skepticism. "Pretty clever, kid. This is one heck of a story," he said, smirking. "But with all the AI tools out there these days, anyone can make pictures like these. It's still impressive, though." Mark's smile widened as he pointed to the top of the shelves. "Take another look," he said, his voice brimming with confidence. Suddenly, the invisible airplane shimmered into view, hovering above the shelves as Mark deactivated the cloaking device. Morris froze, his jaw slack. His eyes darted between Mark and the floating plane, realization dawning with every second. This is real?" Morris stammered, his voice filled with shock. Mark nodded and retrieved the 3 gizmos from his backpack, carefully placing them on the counter. Each device glowed faintly, radiating an alien energy. The sight left Morris speechless. Without a word, he moved to the door, locked it, and flipped the closed sign for privacy. He beckoned Mark toward the back room, his expression unreadable. As they sat in the cramped space, surrounded by piles of comic books and collectibles, Mark studied his uncle's face, trying to gauge his reaction. Morris was stunned, no question. But was it excitement, fear, or something else entirely? He ran his fingers through his hair, pacing slightly before turning to Mark. "Okay, kid, you've got me hooked. Now tell me, what's the plan?" Mark's relief was palpable. Morris believed him, even if his initial reaction was clouded by disbelief. Together, they were about to embark on an adventure unlike anything either of them had imagined. And while Morris wasn't sure exactly what they were stepping into, one thing was clear. It was going to be big. Morris and Mark dove headfirst into planning, their shared love of sci-fi fueling their excitement while also giving them a sense of preparedness. Together, they spent hours discussing every possible scenario, what could go wrong, how to avoid detection, and how to escape if things took a turn for the worse. They were convinced that years of watching sci-fi movies and shows had mentally equipped them for this, or at least, they hoped so. Still, Morris couldn't shake his concern. "Look, Mark," he said, his usual jovial tone replaced with a serious edge, "I can't let anything happen to you. If something went wrong, if you got hurt, Joe would never forgive me. I'd never forgive myself." Mark looked him squarely in the eye. "Uncle Morris, this is my adventure. I chose you to share it with me, not the other way around. If Dad knew about this, he'd shut it down in a heartbeat. But I trust you, and I know you'll have my back." Reluctantly, Morris nodded. He admired Mark's determination and understood his need to explore the unknown, but he still felt the heavy responsibility of keeping his nephew safe. To prepare for the worst, they agreed to leave a note and a recording explaining everything. Mark poured his heart into it, detailing their plans, the gizmos, and the truth about the alien encounters. They left the note at the comic book store and instructed Morris's co-worker to hand it to Joe if Morris failed to show up for work on Monday. With that precaution in place, Morris decided to put work on hold and focus on getting ready. He called Joe, letting him know that Mark was with him and reassuring him they'd return home in a few hours. Joe didn't suspect anything unusual, which gave them the green light to proceed. Their next stop was the hardware store, where they stocked up on supplies, flashlights, extra batteries, a sturdy rope, a crowbar, goggles, and snacks for a few days, just in case they needed to stay hidden. They thought of everything, even discussing the possibility that the aliens might not be hostile. If all else failed, they figured, A bag of candy might serve as a peace offering. Loaded with gear and brimming with nervous energy, the duo headed out, ready to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead. While uncertainty loomed over them, they couldn't help but feel a sense of adventure. This was the moment they'd both dreamed of. The chance to step into the unknown and confront a mystery that was straight out of the stories they loved so much. Whatever happened next, they were in it together. After their trip to the hardware store, Morris and Mark arrived at Mark's house, greeted by the warm, inviting aroma of lasagna from the kitchen. Jasmine, upon learning that Morris would be staying for dinner, had sprung into action, preparing one of her signature dishes. The family gathered around the dining table, sharing laughs and playful stories in the cozy atmosphere. Mark, trying his best to appear relaxed, occasionally exchanged knowing glances with Morris, their shared secret hanging silently in the air. The mood took a sudden turn when Joe, mid-bite, asked Mark about the airplane. "By the way, Mark, where is that plane? I noticed it wasn't in the garage earlier." Mark and Morris froze for a split second, their eyes darting toward each other before Mark quickly recovered. "Oh, I loaned it to a friend for a couple of days," he replied casually, forcing a smile. His heart raced as he uttered the lie, a pang of guilt tugging at him. He hated deceiving his father, but knew he couldn't possibly explain how the airplane had ended up in the back storage room of a comic book shop. Joe nodded, satisfied with the answer, and the conversation resumed its lively tone. Mark exhaled in relief as the family continued sharing jokes and stories, the tension easing. As planned, Morris brought up the idea of taking Mark for the weekend. "Joe, I was thinking, since school's starting up again soon, how about I spend some time with Mark? We could go fishing, just the two of us. A little uncle-nephew bonding." Joe glanced at Jasmine, who shrugged with a knowing smile. Fishing wasn't exactly their favorite activity, but they saw no harm in letting Morris and Mark go. "Sure," Joe said. "Just bring him back in one piece." Mark rushed upstairs after dinner to pack a small bag for the weekend. He kept his essentials light, his focus entirely on the mission ahead. Coming back downstairs, he hugged each family member tightly, lingering just a little longer with each embrace. Deep down, he knew this wasn't just any fishing trip. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. With the car already packed from their earlier trip to the hardware store, Morris and Mark said their goodbyes and headed straight to Morris's downtown apartment. As they drove through the quiet streets, the excitement in the car was palpable. They were finally on their way to the next chapter of their adventure, ready to face whatever mysteries lay ahead. Once inside Morris's apartment, the energy in the air was palpable. It was the moment they had been preparing for, and both Mark and Morris felt the gravity of what they were about to do. The living room, cluttered with stacks of comics and collectibles, now served as their command center. They sat at the table, running through their plan one last time, ironing out every contingency. For every possibility, being spotted by aliens, losing their way, or the portal malfunctioning, they had a response. Or so they thought. Their excitement bubbled just beneath the surface, tempered only by the awareness of the risks they were taking. Next, they moved to revising their equipment, checking every detail with military precision. Flashlights, extra batteries, rope, snacks, and the alien gizmos were laid out like treasures waiting to be wielded. Mark patiently demonstrated how to use the portal device, explaining the quirks he had noticed during his earlier trips. Morris listened intently, his hands trembling ever so slightly as he grasped the reality of what they were about to face. When the moment finally arrived, Mark activated the portal gizmo. The air in the apartment shimmered as the strange swirling vortex opened in the center of the room. Its colors pulsed with otherworldly energy, casting an eerie glow across the walls. Morris stared at it, his breath caught in his throat. This was no sci-fi movie. This was real. To ensure their safety, the two tied a sturdy rope around their waists, linking themselves together. It was the only way the cloaking device could envelop them both simultaneously. The faint hum of the cloaking device activated, and the two of them vanished from sight, their forms blending seamlessly into the environment around them. With one last look at each other, they stepped into the portal. The sensation of crossing through was unlike anything Morris had ever experienced. His body felt weightless, yet stretched, as though suspended in a strange void. Mark, who had done this twice before, immediately noticed something was different. The transfer felt longer, more drawn out, as if the portal were somehow struggling. "This is weird," Mark whispered once they emerged. "It didn't feel like this last time." But Morris barely heard him. His jaw dropped as he looked their surroundings. They were standing inside the alien ship. The sleek, metallic walls glistened faintly, illuminated by ambient light that seemed to emanate from nowhere. Strange symbols adorned the surfaces, glowing faintly like living runes. The air felt dense, humming with energy. This is unbelievable," Morris finally breathed, his eyes wide as he turned in circles to take it all in. "I can't believe we're actually here." They moved carefully, scanning for any signs of alien life. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of machinery. As they explored, they noticed built-in furniture and equipment, everything oversized, as if designed for beings far larger than humans. "They're not Greys," Mark muttered, his voice hushed. "Greys are supposed to be small, like kids. Whatever these aliens are, they're huge." Morris nodded, his mind racing. Every step they took deepened their awe and unease. They had expected something extraordinary, but the reality of the ship, the size, the design, the overwhelming sense of the unknown was almost too much to process. Yet, as the duo crept further into the ship, one thought burned brightly in both their minds. They were about to uncover secrets that humanity had only ever dreamed of.